This is Gemara in Eiruvin, Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Today's Shiur should be a schus for Shlomo Yudameir ben Yakir Emmanuel ben Figel Chaim Ram Chanita Chaim ben Sar Shem Simon Israel Zar Bas Kendel Devasim Bas Chaisar Yosef Chaim ben Sarasna Yosef Yob ben Mindel as a person is Shavalei Tinik ben Chitzel Sar Shlomo Bas Naomi Bashak Figel Bas Sir Chana Yifal Tov ben Itariva Shoshana Teva Bas Esther Besar Shachali Israel. We pick it up in the bottom of Beis Mid Beis El Me'ata, moving along to Gimel Amud Aleph. We're in the middle of discussing the Machlekes Rav Yehuda and the Chachamim as with regard to the maximum height of the kaira of the horizontal beam of a mavui. A mavui is a three-sided street, a cul-de-sac at that end, that midaraisa, you're allowed to carry from that mavui into the street. Midrabanan, they required a hecker of sorts, as we'll see today, something to remind you that you're not allowed to carry in the street. What do they require? Either a lechi, a vertical beam, or a kaira, a horizontal beam, which we'll see today. This kaira, this horizontal beam, the Chacham in the Mishnah said, needs to be 20 amos tall maximum, which Rav Yehuda Marav said, we learn out from the Heichel, and Rav Yehuda said, no, the maximum height of that kaira could be more than 20 amos, like the ulam, the antechamber door, which is even taller. So today the Gemara comes along asking on the opinion of the Chachamim that seemingly learns out that it has to be maximum 20 amos from the Heichel El Me'ata. Moving along to Gimel Amud Aleph. Whoever has a screen in front of them, you'll see this in front of you. Lo tahane le amaltara, and a maltara should not help. Why? The Heichel amaltara havale, because the Heichel had an amaltara. Vafiluachi esramamu the gavaya, and yet the Heichel was only 20 amos. So what's the question? The Gemara is going to explain, number one, what is an amaltara? So sort of decorative beam, we'll see in a moment. Number two, we're going to see that the Heichel seemingly had this decorative beam, and yet, what's the din by the Heichel? It's only 20 amos tall. And so what's the question? We'll see another thing is that by Eiruvin, we'll find out that an amaltara will allow it to be even taller than 20 amos. So now let's let the Gemara explain. 3 lines down, the Tanakh we learned in the Mishnah Chamish amaltara shel mila. There were 5 amaltaras of mila. You have a certain type of oak wood, cedar wood, al gabav, zul amal mizu. Chamish amaltara shel mila. You al gabav, zul amal mizu, v'zul amal mizu. One on top of the other, top of the other, top of the other, and that is what was by the entranceway to the Heichel. And yet, says the Gemara, the maximum height was only 20 amos. As you see over here, this picture. My apologies, that is not the correct picture. As you see over here, that's a picture for a moment. As you see over here, this picture, at the entranceway, this is the doorway moving into the Beis HaMikdash, and you see at this entranceway, you'll see these 5 horizontal beams on top of the entranceway. These are amaltaras. These are these decorative beams, and even though it had these 5 decorative beams, the maximum height was still 20 amos. So says the Gemara, so seemingly the question is going to be that this Heichel had these decorative beams, which are only 20 amos tall, and yet it was only 20 amos tall. So by Eiruvin, even if the beam, the kaira at the entranceway to the Eruv, at the entranceway to the Mavui is an amaltara, is a decorative beam, it should still only be allowed to be 20 amos tall. Says the Gemara, so what's your question? Dilma kitanya hi amaltarais b'ulam. Maybe that was only the amaltaras of the ulam. Maybe the ulam, the antechamber, the outside room, the outside, the original doorway in, like Rav Yehuda learned, maybe that's where they had these amaltaras, Tanya. That's where they were. But maybe the Heichel, the inner doorway, they did not have it. My kusha, says the Gemara. Dilma, tam this Heichel, kedam this ulam. Maybe they're the same. And everyone's wondering, what's all this Dilma business? So the Ritva speaks out, it's not really a Dilma. It really means the Gemara knows that this is the fact. That really the doorway was number one, these amaltaras, these decorative beams. The Mishnah that we just quoted was really by the Ulam. But number 2 says the Gemara, the Heichel was the same thing. The tamness of the Heichel was the same thing as the tamness of the Ulam. And therefore the Gemara says that by the entranceway to the Heichel, which we know is a maximum height of 20 amos, had these decorative beams. So what does this have to do with us, our Kaira by Eiruvin? Alama Amarav Eloi Amarav. Why did Rav Eloi say name Amarav 8 lines down? Rachava Dalit Afal B'Sheinei Priya. If the Kaira of this horizontal beam is 4 tfachim thick, but it's not strong, Vim Yeshla Amaltra Filu Gavaya Yoiser Me'aver Tzermama Inoisarach Lamayit. But if it is an amaltra, then says this brisa, says Rav Ila Amarav, then it's allowed to be even taller than 20 amos. Now we finally understand their question. That the question is that seemingly when you have an amaltra, when you have a decorative beam, which again, we know the Gemara did not tell us 100% what it was, the Gemara will tell us in a moment. But when you have this decorative beam, says Rav Ila Amarav, says the brisa, maximum height, more than 20 amos. Why? By the Heichel it had these decorative beams, and yet the maximum height was only 20 amos. So Amar Rav Yosef comes along, Rav Yosef, Amaltra Masnitari. This din of Amaltra, this din that it's allowed to be taller than 20 amos by the Kaira, by the entranceway to the Mavui, is a brisa. Man Ketanila, who taught it? Amar Rabaya v'chama breder Rav Avua ketani la. It was chama breder Rav Avua. So says the Gemara, v'tiavi amaltra masnita. So let's say that this din of amaltra, that the mavui is allowed to have a kaira, this decorative kaira above 20 amos, is a brisa, v'tikshi l'Rav. And then it's going to be a question on Rav. Who's Rav? So Rav was the one that explained, Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav in the back of Bezim and Aleph, Rav was one that explained that the Chachamim learned it out from the Heichel. So the Gemara says, very good. The Brisa says that how tall is the Mavui allowed to be? 20 amas. If it has an amaltura, says Rabbi Ilah Marav, even more than 20 amas. Problem is, Rabbi Yehuda Marav taught us that we learned out from the Heichel. And by the Heichel, it had an amaltura, it had this decorative beam, and it was only 20 amas. So Amalach Rav, so Rav comes along to defend himself. Take me out of this. Masnita Amila Kashana Adadi. Are the Mishnahs themselves not a question? Meaning, you're asking a question on me, Rav Yudah Marav. What about the Brises themselves are Saiser? What's the Brisa? Because I proved on Beis Amid Beis, without a shadow of a doubt, that according to the Chachamim, they learned it out from the Heichel. So that Brisa that seemingly taught us that the Chachamim learned it out from Heichel is a direct steer to this Rav Ilah Marav that said when there's an Amaltura, it's allowed to be above 20 amos. Ella, what are you going to tell me? Tanai, you're going to answer me to Machlekes Tanaim. Says the Gemara, L'didei nami Tanai. According to me, says Rabbi Yudah Marav, it's also Machlekes Tanaim. And therefore, is it a question? No, different Tanaim. One Tana holds that he learned it out from the Heichel, and a different Tana teaches us that the Amaltra, if it's a decorative beam, it's allowed to be even taller than 20 amos. Says the Gemara, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, V'loi Rav masnita adadi loy kasha. So comes like Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and he says, no, it's really only a question of Rav. If not for Rav, the Mishnah himself, the Bryce himself, would not be a question. Masnita adadi loy kasha. The Rabbanon kaira taimamai. Why is it not a question? So according to the Rabbanon, what's the whole reason that you need this kaira? What's the whole reason that you need this horizontal beam with entrance way to the Mavoi? Is because of what? Is because of that kaira. Is caused to be recognizable, to know that you're about to leave the Mavoi. V'hai tekatani, that which we learned yesterday, Pesach Shaleichol, simana be'alma. It was just a simin. It was just like a way to remind yourself that like the dory of the Heichal is 20 amos. But when it comes to the Mavoi, really the whole purpose of it is to be a hacker. And since the whole purpose of it is to be a hacker, if it's going to be decorative, it will be allowed even taller than 20 amos, because your eye grabs hold of something taller than 20 amos when the item is decorative, as the Gemara is going to explain. If you want to see really Rashi over here, Misham Hacker, Rashi comes along and Rashi says, people should know that you made this kaira, and that's the whole reason over here. So you don't come to carry, says Rabbim, says Rashi, and that's the reason why Mahanile Amaltra, that's why it's going to help an Amaltra even when it's taller. The Kivan, the Mistakli base, says Rashi, since you look at it in Shia, and that is the reason why there's going to be a hacker even above 20 amas. Says the Gemara. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, says the Gemara. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak hanicha iloi savar lei haderava. It's good if Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak doesn't hold this din of Rava. Elai savar lei haderaba. I'm sorry, haderaba. But if he holds this din of Rabba, then it's a problem. What's this Rabba? Says the Gemara. Dama Rabba teaches us. Leman ksiv, the pasuk says leman yedu dayresichem, that you should know for your generations, Kiba Sukkah Isay Shafti. Very famous pasuk. Sukkah is on the horizon. Kiba Sukkah Isay Shafti, that you should dwell in a sukkah. What do we learn out of this pasuk? That your generation should know Ad Esrim Amma, until 20 Amos Adam Yudea Shadar B'Sukkah. A person knows that they're living in a sukkah. When it's above 20 amos, ein adam yoidea, a person does not know. Meaning, the maximum height of a sukkah is only 20 amos. Why? Mishom deloi shalta be'ena, because the eye does not reach something above 20 amos. Alma, so what do we see? Kavi sukkah nami be'keira peligi. We see that they argued by sukkah as well. If lamali. So what's the reason now that you're telling me that the whole reason over here is because of a hacker, and we have the same argument by sukkah? Why do you have to have the argument two times? It's meaning both times Rabbi Yehuda said that it's a hacker, the Chum said it's a hacker, they said the Chum said it has to be under 20, and Yehuda said it could be above 20. Says the Gemara, Sricha, we still need it. If we only said the din by sukkah, I would have thought, that's where Rabbi Yehuda says. That's where Rav Yehuda teaches us that it's allowed to be above 20 amos. Yeshiva Avidi. What is the purpose of a sukkah? The purpose of a sukkah is to sit in the sukkah. And therefore, when you're sitting and you're having a suit, you're having a meal in the sukkah, invariably the eyes wander. You look around, as Rashi explains, and therefore invariably you're going to see up, even if it's above 20 amos. So maybe that's where Rabbi Yehuda allows more than 20 amos. Avo mavoi, but a mavoi del hilach avid, that a mavoi is made for walking around. Ema mote the rabbanan. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the rabbanan. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's not enough. If it does not work if it's above 20 amos, because since you're walking, you might just walk right out of the mavoi and not see the kaira, not see the beam so high up. And that's the reason why we had to say both dinim. Now we flip it around. 3 lines before the wide lines. V'yash mina baha. And if we only said a din by our case, welcome rabbanan, only in our case, see the rabbanan there, din that has to be under 20. Why? Because you're walking around. Aval bahach, but in the case of Sukkah, Rabbi Yehuda, maybe agree to the svara of Rabbi Yehuda that since you're sitting, your eyes are going to variably go up. Therefore, sricha, therefore we had to say both cases, and even though they're both because of a hacker, we still had to say both cases. That is the end of this question of the Amaltara on Rabbi Yehuda, on the Chachamim, I should say. But now, it's the end of the question, but the Gemara has not explained yet what is an Amaltara. So the Gemara comes along in the last narrow line, and the Gemara says, Maya Amaltara, the question we've been waiting for since the beginning of today. What is an Amaltara? Rav Chama Rei Derava, Derava Bar Avu, Amar Kini. It is a bird's nest. Kias Rav Dimi Amar Rava, Piske Darza, in some sort of cedar wood, different types of decorative. Over here is a picture. It's a little bit blurry, I apologize. Here's a picture of the cedar wood. You see it's some sort of fancy wood. Here's a picture of the bird's nest. It's actually machlekes we showing him how this bird's nest was. Was it something that attracted birds? Was it pictures of birds on the beam? But either way, the point of the story is, like we've been explaining the whole day, the whole point is that it grabs your attention, and that's the reason why it's going to work, potentially even above 20 amos. Says Gemara, Mandamar Piska Darza, according to Mandamar, the second Mandamar that says that it's the cedar wood, Kol Shekain Kini. Certainly they'll greet the bird's nest. However, Mandamar Kini, the Mandamar that says it's the wood of a bird, Aval Piska Darza Loi, but they're going to say maybe this Piska Darza, maybe the cedar wood is not so attractive, it's not going to catch your eye so much. Mandamar Piska Darza, according to Mandamar that says it's the cedar wood, my taima, which of the Nafesh Mishchei, because it's very long. Since these cedar poles are very long, they're very noticeable, that's the reason. Bas Sukkah, says the Gemara, 1 second. If that's the whole purpose, is that it's very noticeable, it's very long. But what about a Sukkah? The Sukkah the Nafesh Mishchei, and yet the Kamer Rabbanan, the Rabbanan came along. The Kamer Rabbanan Deloi, and the Ka'ami Rabbanan Deloi, and even though by a Sukkah, the Schach of the Sukkah it's very big, and yet the Rabbanan said it only up to 20 amos. So why by us, the Pischa D'Arza? Why is cedar wood going to change it? Ella Kim the Chashiv is like Allah, since it is Chashiv, since it's noticeable, it's a nice piece of wood, people talk about it and everyone will know about it, and that's the reason why the Pischa D'Arza is going to work. Says the Gemara, 4 lines into the wide lines, Mixas Kaira B'Seich Esrim, Mixas Kaira Lamalami Esrim. What is the din if part of the beam is within 20 and part of the beam is above 20? Or Mixas Chach B'Seich Esrim, Mixas Chach Lamalami Esrim. And here's a beautiful picture, courtesy of Daf Achayim. You see over here that he drew so beautifully how both the Kaira and the Schach are, part of it is below 20, part of it is above 20. So there's a fundamental question whenever we say numbers, is it the number, does the whole thing have to be below 20, maybe just the airspace, what exactly is it? So comes along the Gemara, and the Gemara says, the Gemara says, Amar Rabba, comes along Rabba, and Rabba teaches us, or 6 lines into the wide lines, B'mavoi kosher, B'sukkah pasol. Comes along Rabba, and he differentiates between a mavoi and a sukkah. By a mavoi, if part of it is below and part of it is on top, it's going to be okay. By a sukkah, it's not going to be okay. Maishan mavoi de kosher. Why by a mavoi is going to be kosher? Tamrinan kolosh. Because by the mavoi, we're going to say, you know what? Cut it off. Pretend that the top part is not here, and there is a piece of it under 20, so you're okay. Says the Gemara, 1 second. By sukkah nami, by the sukkah as well, lema kolosh. We should say the same thing. Why don't we say kolosh? Why don't we say cut off part of the beam, cut off part of the schach, and the other part will be under 20? Says the Gemara, if you cut it off, if you take off part of the schach, it to be more sun than shade. We know an integral ingredient of every sukkah is that it has to be more shade than sun. But if you shave off the whole top layer of the schach, it's not going to have enough. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Hachanami, in our case, if you cut a part of the beam, he tells Baruch, it's going to be a beam that comes down with the wind. And that we'll learn later on that the beam, the kaira, has to be able to sufficiently stand at least the weight of a brick. Can't be saying it just blows away. So how's that going to work? Ela Karchach says the Gemara, what are you going to answer me? We make it as if it's like pieces of metal, and therefore, even though it's a very thin beam, but we make it as if it's very strong. Says the Gemara, 1 second. So too by the sukkah, we should say that it's as if the shade is more than the sun. So basically, we're bothered. Why did Rabbah say that b'sukkah kosher, b'sukkah basel, and b'mavi kosher? Amar Rava mi barzakye sukkah diliyachadi loy midkar. Sukkah is your own little sukkah. You're not going to come to recognize it. Mavi dil rabbi midkri adadi. But mavi, since it's of a rabbim, they're going to come to remind each other. Says the Gemara, what does that have to do? Mitkri adadi or lo mitkri adadi? Before we see Ravina, let's just see a Rashi over here. Rashi at the very bottom of the narrow lines. Rashi says loy mitkar. The zimde de mishtakel mixas oivias chach. Maybe you're going to take off part of the schach. Ha nichnas l'toichaf. They're going to shave off too much. What's going to happen? It's all going to be above 20. Meaning there's a concern over here. There's a concern that as you're cutting off part of it, you can cut off too much, and you're going to come to invalidate the entire thing. And therefore, says the Gemara, when it comes to a sukkah that's a singular entity, therefore we have to be more careful. However, when it comes to the mavois, it's not a singular entity. Therefore, if they're going to remind each other and make sure they don't come to cut off too much. That was the first answer. Comes on the Gemara, that was Rava. Comes like Ravina Amar Sukkah da'araisa achmir barabanan. Sukkah's a din da'araisa. Since Sukkah's a din da'araisa, Chachamim were more machmir. Mavis da'rabanan la achmir barabanan. Da'rabanan were not machmir. A second darts. Rav Ramasna maslo shmaita da'rabba bevcha. He learned this din the exact opposite way around. Says the Gemara Amar Rabba, and he explains. B'mavli possible b'sukkah kosher. The exact opposite. By a mavli it's possible. By a sukkah it's kosher. Ma'ishna sukkah the ksheira. What's the reason? Arina kolish. We say cut off the top. So the Gemara has the same question. But mavli nami lema kolish. Why don't we say cut off the top? Says the Gemara. He tells Baruch. Can't say that. Because if you cut it off, it's going to be too thin. It's going to blow away. It can't be hold the brick. So too, if you cut off the schach, it's going to be something that's more sun than shade. What are we going to tell you? 5 lines to the bottom. So we view it as if it's more shade than sun. We should view it as if they're made out of metal. Amar Rav mi Barzakya, Sukkah del Yachidu Rami Anavsheu Mitkar, Mavadil Rabim, we Samchi Adadiv Lo Mitkare. Very important rule. Sukkah is singular. It's the exact opposite svara. Sukkah is singular, and therefore you're going to be very careful. Mavi is a lot of people, so no one's going to come to fix it. Amrina Inchi, everyone's going to say, Amrina Inchi, like people say, I'm sorry, Kidra the Bei Shofti, the pot of Shotfim, Lechamimi, V'loi Kariri. The pot of Shofim doesn't get too hot, doesn't get it too cold, meaning everyone's continuously playing with it all the time. Ravina Amar comes along Ravina 2 lines to the bottom and he says Sukkah deraisa by chizik, Mavderabanan by chizik. The exact opposite. And these are always the things that we have to play with when it comes to deraisa derabanan. Ravina says when it comes to deraisa, doesn't need chizik. It itself is a very chamer din, so no one's going to come to play with it. When it comes to derabanan, then that needs chizik. My Avi Allah says the Gemara, what was the maskana? Rabbi Ravula Amar, Zev Zeh Pasal, Rava Amar, Zev Zeh Kosher. We have a machlekes, Rabbi Ravuna, that he says they're both pasal, and Rava says no, they're both kosher. Moving along to Gimlam and Beis, and now Rava explains what is the reason why I hold they're both kosher. Chalal Sukkah Tanan on the top line, Chalal Mavui Tanan. Because you don't need, when it says 20 Amais, what does it mean 20 Amais, says Rava? It means the airspace has to be 20 Amais. But so therefore, as long as the kaira is within a bit, and therefore the airspace of the doorway is 20 amais, it's going to be fine. I'll bring you a right to that which you said. Mavi should go by a messer mama. If a mavi that's 20 amais told you more than the doorway of the echol, you have to shrink in it. And the echol, how big was the doorway? The airspace of the doorway was 20. So you see clearly that in this price it says, it points out the airspace, not just the height, and therefore it says Rava, that's the reason why they're both going to be kosher. Says the Gemara 4 lines down, Gimel and base. What do you do? You have to put the beam at the edge of 20 and below, or above. What do you mean? Meaning, the Gemara has a question. The Gemara says, the Brisa seemingly says, that it has to be within 20, seemingly pointing out that the airspace has to be, that the actual beam has to be within 20, not just the airspace like we just answered. So the Gemara now answers, Ema ulamala. No, it doesn't mean from the edge and down. It means from the edge and up, leaving the airspace is 20. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Lamata katani. It says lamata the brisa. Hakamashla, an interesting answer, says the Gemara, the lamata kilamala, malamala chalala esrim, af lamata chalala esrim. So we're deichik the brisa, and the Gemara comes out that as long as the airspace is 20, then it's going to be enough. Comes along the Gemara, and that is the halach l'maisor coming out with that as long as the beam leaves an airspace of 20, that's going to be fine, like the opinion of Rava. Amar Abaye comes along Abaye Mishmei de Rav Nachman. We're at the 2 dots, about 10 lines down, Gimel on base. Amar Abaye Mishmei de Rav Nachman. Amas sukkah, va'amas mavui, va'ama bas chamisha, amas kalayim, va'ama bas shisha. There's 2 types of amas. Is an amma 5 tvachim or is an amma 6 tvachim? And obviously, as we're going to see in the Gemara right now, one is not always a kula or a chumrah. It depends what you're measuring. If that was a little complicated for your mathematical brains, we'll see in a moment what the Gemara means. But says the Gemara, by kalayim we use a 6 tvachim amma. By sukkah and by mavoi we use a 5 tvachim amma. Says the Gemara, amas mavoi ba'ama bas chamisha. Lamai yachasa. For what reason? L'goiva, for the height of the mavoi. L'pirtzas mavoi, and for the opening of the mavoi. So that's when the amma is going to be 5 tfachim. So we know it's 20 amma, so to be 100 tfachim is going to be the maximum height of the mavui. It says the Gemara, what's going on? So you're telling me that the reason that we're saying these things seemingly is because we're always going to chumrah, that we're using the smaller measurement, so it's only allowed to be 100 tfachim. And whereas if it would be using the 6 tefach measurement, then you would be allowed to have 120 tfachim. Says the Gemara, because again, 20 amos times 5 is 100 tvachim, 20 amos times 6 is 120 tvachim. So the Gemara is saying that we go l'chumrah, therefore we use the 5 tefach measurement. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Still a kula. But there's the meshach, the depth of the mavi, that the depth of the entranceway is only allowed to be 4 amos. And therefore that's going to come out to be a kula. Says the Gemara, no. Command Amar Barba Tvachim. We're going according to Command Amar is machlekes that we'll see later on. So machlekes is how deep is the doorway allowed to be. One Command Amar says 4 amos. One Command Amar says 4 Tvachim. We're going with Command Amar that says 4 Tvachim. Vibai same another teretz says Barba amos. No, we can agree with Command Amar 4 amos. But then it comes out of Kula. The Roiv amos Kamar. It means the majority of the amos, the Roiv amos are going to be l'chumrah. It doesn't mean all the amos, it means roiv of the amos. And therefore the fact that one din is going to be a kula, that is not a question. Says the Gemara, amma sukkah ba'amma bas chamisha. Now we move along. We said that the amma mavui is 5. The amma of sukkah is 5 tvachim. What does that have to do with anything? L'mayel chasaf, what halacha? L'gaiva l'dayfen akuma. For the height of the sukkah, the dayfen akuma. What is a dayfen akuma? Here's a beautiful dayfen akuma. Dayfen akuma, as you see in front of you, is when we view that the wall is considered bent over, and up until a certain measurement, we're allowed to view it not as if it's pasal schach, but rather as if it's part of the wall. We bend up that part of the wall, and then we allow it to be a kosher sukkah. So says the Gemara, and that's when we use the 5 tefach measurement, which ends up again being a chumrah, meaning you're allowed to have a smaller space for your dayfen akuma. For that bent wall, the top piece of the schach, that is not kosher schach. Well, it says the Gemara, what's going on? You have the rest of the sukkah, which is 4 amos, still a kula, which that comes out to be a kula. The Tani, we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Omer, Rabbi says, Omer kol sukkah she'in boy dalet amos. Any sukkah which is not dalet amos, dalet amos psula. So if here you're using the 5 tvachim, comes out to be a kula, because we see that the minimum size of a sukkah is very small. Kirabanan da'amri afilu ina machzekes al rosh ruba yishalchanai. Says Mar, no, we're going according to the opinion of the chachamim, that they hold that as long as the sukkah holds your head, your body, your head, and the majority of your body, then that's going to be okay. And it does not have to do with the 4 amos. Therefore, it's not a question. By saying the same answer we said before, 5 lines before the wide lines. La'olam Rabbi. Really going to the opinion of Rabbi that it's 4 amos. V'roiv amos kamar, and the fact that one case comes out of kula, it just means the majority of the time we go l'chumra by the amma of mavoy and the amma of sukkah. Now we move along ammas kalayim. Now we're up to the amma of kalayim, which we said is ba'amma bas shisha. It's a 6 tefach amma, which is going to be a kula. L'mayel chasa, says the Gemara. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Let's let the Gemara talk. L'mayel chasa, what halacha Is the Klayim 6 Tvachim, Lekarachas HaKaren, V'limchol HaKaren, for two different halachas, as the Gemara is about to explain, for the clearing of the karen, the bald spot of the karen, and the perimeter of the karen. The basic halacha of Klayim, everyone knows, is you're not allowed to plant two different species together. So we're going to discuss here a vineyard, and we're going to want to know when in this vineyard, when within these grapes, you're going to be allowed to plant grain. So says the Gemara, this now we learned in the Brayso. Karachas HaKaren, the bald spot of the clearing of the vineyard, Beishami Oimrim, Esrim Varba Amos, 24 Amos. Ubeis Hillel Oimrim, comes along Beis Hillel, and Beis Hillel says, no, not 24 Amos, but rather, Shish Esri Amma, 16 Amma. Umachla Karen, again, we'll show all the pictures in a moment. Umachla Karen on the first wide line, and the perimeter of the vineyard, Beishami Aimrim, Shish Esri Amos, is 16 Amos. Ubeisila Aimrim, Shtem Esri Amos, 12 Amos. I know there was just a lot of numbers without explaining. Let's let the Gemara explain. What is this clearing, this bald spot literally of the vineyard? Kerem Shecharav Bem Siyasai. Oh, you have a vineyard that the center of the vineyard was cleared away. Here is a beautiful picture. Here's a kerem. Here's your vineyard. And as you see, the center of the vineyard was cleared away. As it says over here, farmable area, courtesy of our scroll. The center area is farmable area. So the question is, how big does this center area have to be? Let's just explain based on this picture, then we'll go back to the Gemara. You see over here, the work amos is 4 amos. That's very important. You always need to leave a 4 amma break for allow the plowshare to go around and do its thing. So over here on the perimeter, you have grapes, and then you have this empty area, and now we have this middle area. So the question is, how big does the middle area have to be in order to allow you to plant the different species, not grapes? Says the Gemara. You have the grapes, then you have 4 amos to plant it. How big is that middle area? So that's machlekes Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says 8 amos, Beis Shammai says 16. Why? Beis Hillel says 8 amos because you have 4 amos and 4 amos. Because you always have to go where any point that you are, you need to have another 4 amos left over in order to be an area that is considered chashav. This is how Rashi explains. Therefore, says Beis Hillel, you're going to need 8 amos. Beis Shammai says no, the small area that's chashav is going to be 8 amos. So Beis Shammai is going to require 16 amos in the middle. So now, if you do the math, basically, if you have 4 amos, and then you have 8 amos in the middle, and another 4 amos on the other side, that's 16 according to Beis Hillel. Whereas according to Beis Shammai, you have 16 in the middle, 4 on one side, 4 on the other side, that is 24 amos. Let's go back to the Gemara over here, 2 lines into the wide lines, and we're basically finished. Izi karach like Karen, what is the bald spot? Karen shachar bem siyasai. Again, the middle of the Karen, as you just saw, was cleared away. Ein sham sheis esri amos. We're in the opinion of Beis Shammai. If you don't have 16 amos, lo yavi zer l'sham, 3 lines down, do not bring any seed over there. But if there are 16 amos there, nice like kedei avodasai, leave over that area to work, that 4 amma area that we saw in the picture, and then plant the rest of it. Now let's go into the next one, then we'll speak it all out again. What is the machal? What is the perimeter of the karen? So here again is another beautiful picture of the perimeter of the karen. It's a very similar case, but over here we're trying to figure out the area on the outside. How big is the area on the outside? So basically, let's just speak it out based on this picture, then we'll learn it inside. You have a wall, and when he doesn't see the picture, let's try to speak it out. You have a wall. Then again, you always leave 4 amos next to the wall that you don't plant, because if you plant too close to the wall, destroy the wall. Then you have the farmable area, and then you have another 4 amos you always have to leave blank to let the animals, the plows, go by. So again, according to Beis Hillel, the small area is 4 amos. So therefore, the plantable area, as you see over here, is going to be 4 amos. So you can have 4 amos of blank space, 4 amos of plantable area, and another 4 amos, 4, 8, 12. Whereas according to Beis Shammai, you always need 8 amos in this small chashav area. So according to Beis Shammai, you have 4 amos at the end, you have 8 amos in the middle, and then another 4 amos to let the animal go by. Let's see that inside the Gemara. Izohi machla kerem. We're 4 lines into the wide lines. I'm sorry, the highlighting is not working right now. What is the machla kerem? Ben kerem legeder. Between the vineyard and the wall, ein sham shtei mesri amma. There's not 12 amos. Lo yavi zer l'sham, don't bring the seed to there. Ha yusham shtei mesri amma, if there is 12 amos there, then nice and loy, kedei avavizasai, then leave over the 4 amos, v'zayir zashar, and plant the rest. And of course, the 12 is going to be 4, 8, 12, according to the opinion of Beis Hillel. So this is where we see that by the amma of the kalayim, we see that if you use a 6 tefach amma, you can need a larger space between all these numbers that we just said. You can need a large area. And thereafter, by kalayim, it comes out of chumrah to use this amma of 6 tefachim. And the Gemara concludes, it says, Vayika retufim, 5 lines down. What about the retufim? The each row can't be planted so close to each other. So now if you use a 6 tefach one, Ba'arba amma is still a kula. Now it's going to come out to be a Kula, the Tanan Karen and the two Alpachs Me'ar Ba'amois, Shimon Me'ina Karen, V'chamayim Karen, Verinis and Vesaz, like Kilu Einam, we view the middle guys if they're not there. Karabanas, so my answer is similar to we said before. Karabanan Damri, Havi Karen V'Baisima, that's one teres. V'Baisima, Rav Shimon, V'Roi V'Amois Kamar, there could be one case with an exception, Roi V'Amois Kamar. We'll say over this last piece again tomorrow, and we'll pick up from here tomorrow.